Welcome to Ballot Battleground Nevada. I'm your host, Ben Marjat, a reporter at KRNV News 4 in Reno. I'm passionate about making politics in this critical battleground state more digestible to the average voter and pushing past the talking points to press politicians for answers. On this show, we take deep dives into the people, ideas, and debates shaping Silver State politics. In the wake of that now infamous Trump-Biden debate, it seemed Republicans were headed for victories up and down the ballot in November. The always excellent Cook Political Report shifted the Silver State from toss-up to lean Republican, along with a few other swing states. But in just a month's time, the entire narrative about the 2024 race changed after Democrats swapped out their struggling nominee for Kamala Harris. Now Nevada is back in play, and both candidates are seeing that opportunity. Case in point, both Trump and Harris have held events in our state this month, and both are making a specific play for hospitality workers. Trump announced his plan to end taxes on tips for service workers, and Harris shortly thereafter said she supports that policy too. Here's Trump touting that very plan Friday in Las Vegas.
We've come here today to talk about the biggest promise I think that the restaurant workers have had in a long time, and that's no tax on tips. And in our case, we mean it.
Trump and Harris will surely be back soon as the polls show a neck-and-neck race here in Nevada, where Harris leads on average by less than a half a percentage point. We thought it was the perfect time to zoom out a bit and get the state of the race from a national perspective once again with the Cook Political Report, one of the best election forecasters in the country. Jessica Taylor was kind enough to join us again and share some of her expert analysis. And stick around until the end. We're launching a new segment, fact-checking campaign commercials. This week, we're digging for context and fact-checking Jacky, Rosen, and Sam Brown's ads on abortion. But first, our chat with Jessica Taylor. And joining me once again is Jessica Taylor, the Senate and Governor's editor for the Cook Political Report. Your second time on the podcast, Jessica. I think that makes you officially a friend of the pod now. So we're glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Last time we chatted feels like decades ago in the political world. We were talking obviously about Joe Biden in the race. Things have shifted and turned on their head pretty much. But before we get into that, let's start with last week. I mean, you were at the Democratic National Convention on the ground in Chicago. What did you take away from that experience being there at the DNC? And did you go to the RNC as well? Were you able to kind of compare the two conventions?
I did. I went to both. So very different experiences in very different ways. I mean, at the RNC, this was about 3 weeks after the debate. I think we can just call it the debate,
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, Republicans were just incredibly confident. I mean, people I were talking to, they were talking about cabinet picks and who might succeed J.D. Vance in the Senate. So it was it felt like a foregone conclusion. We did an event with Tony Fabrizio, who's Trump's pollster. And, at that point they were talking about, we can expand the map into Minnesota, into Virginia, into New Mexico. So there was just a lot of confidence. And then, 72 hours after we get back, everything changed. So, how that week would have been different, I think, it's in a way hard to compare the two just because the entire thing blew up, that
Right.
They were running against Joe Biden. They felt like this was just, he's weak, he's feeble. Trump had just survived an assassination attempt, which also feels like it was 100 years ago. I mean, it was just, but I mean, we also saw at that RNC, for those first few days, Trump was unusually quiet. And I think that was helping him in a way because the story was about Biden. He again, survived this assassination attempt. They were feeling this air of inevitability. And then, the first part of his speech, I was on the floor for, and there was a lot of energy at first. And then as Trump is wont to do, he just kept rambling and rambling and rambling. And let me tell you, my feet were really hurting. Other people seemed to be really tired, where he got into talking about Hannibal Lecter. This was not on the teleprompter. It was like Trump's biggest enemy is himself in this regard, where he can just, you quit while you're ahead. You had this speech, you had this message, focus on Biden. And even when it was just Biden, he was rambling and was off topic. And then what we've seen in the intervening weeks and months, I think, is that with Harris as the nominee and has really thrown him completely for a loop, that he doesn't know how to talk about her, questioning whether she's Black enough. I mean, it was supposed to be this economy, immigration message. That's what we saw at the RNC. And at the DNC, like the word that like everyone used every night was just joy. And I was sitting there many times wondering like how different this would have been had it been Biden. And I mean, I don't think the arena would have been full. There would not have been as many people there. There would not have been, the celebrities that were there, I mean, the DNC sort of always gets this, kind of bigger bump in a way from celebrities and stuff. The RNC had Kid Rock and Hulk Hogan and different stuff. And then, we had Oprah at the DNC.
Yeah. So, no Beyonce, though, unfortunately for you.
Oh my gosh, that was crazy. We really thought it was going to be Beyonce. And so it almost felt like a little bit of a letdown when it was like just Kamala Harris taking the stage, which they said sort of this rumor mill had been going the whole week. And like, it really had hit a fever pitch, and when TMZ reported it, TMZ's almost never wrong. So we were like, we're getting Beyonce. And then like Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, comes out and I'm like, is Roy Cooper going to introduce Beyonce? And no. So
Leon Panetto was the major guest, the surprise guest.
Yeah, for real. That's what I kind of felt like. Yeah, he was the only one that didn't make sense sort of in that lineup, putting the former defense secretary, in the primetime lineup. But yeah, there was a lot of energy. I mean, just every speech every night from, Biden's speech certainly well received. Hillary, Bill Clinton and Tim Walz just got a complete, bringing down the house. And when his son reacted, I mean, you could just see a lot of humanity there, I think. And Harris's speech, I think she really, I think she spoke to a lot of sort of those undecided voters and sort of the middle. And I think if she runs her campaign that way, then that could certainly be a winning message. This isn't over. I think I did hear from a lot of Democrats that certainly things are different than they were a month ago and that they were even in this. We also did an event at the DNC with Future Forward. We did a panel with Future Forward, which is the main super PAC that had been supporting Biden and is now supporting Harris. And their founder actually said that, in those intervening weeks after the debate, their model showed that Biden only had a single digit percentage chance of winning.
Wow.
That's how grim things looked. But they were also cautioning that, some of these really rosy polls we're seeing, they're like, we're not seeing those numbers. Like, is it better? Are we in the mix? Yes. But like this, we should not think that this is a completely done deal.
That heads into my next question, which was going to be obviously a far more, the RNC was very confident in its own way. In the DNC, there was a lot of optimism. Mm-hmm. Does that translate to confidence, or is it just an optimism that now at least we have a fighting chance? Is that the sense?
You had Michelle Obama probably got one of the best receptions the entire convention. You can see why Democrats keep wish casting that she's going to run, which if you've read her autobiography, I don't think she's ever going to, but
she hates politics.
Yeah, exactly. But, she was like, do something. That was her like thing, like, don't just stand here, like do something. And you kind of heard that refrain throughout the week, like go volunteer. And when I'm talking with sources in a lot of these states and certainly there in Nevada, that, just the increase they're seeing in volunteers, in canvassers, and money coming in is just exponentially different than when it was Biden on the ticket. That Harris, I think, has appealed to some of those, younger voters that just were not motivated, that she sort of offers this new hope. I mean, it really did feel a little bit like 2008 again. I heard several people say that, like they felt like this was very Obama-esque. And what, we've seen typically in elections, the change candidate tends to win. 2008, Obama was the change candidate. In 2016, Trump was the change candidate from the Clinton.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Biden was the change candidate from Trump in 2020. And ironically enough, Trump was essentially going to be the change candidate to Biden. And I think Harris has flipped that on its head now. Even though she's a member of the Biden administration, she doesn't come with the same pitfalls that the president did. I mean, certainly I think it helps that, she's 59 and not 81. But I think that she, the vice president is just she's not as well known, and that's worked to her benefit, that she's been able to sort of carve out her own identity. I mean, they're out there blasting Beyonce every night. Like, I can't get like the freedom song out of my head, which is better than Hillary's, fight song. So I'll
Oh
take.
my gosh, right. What a throwback that is. So, I mean, let's zoom out though and take a look at kind of the state of the race broadly, because as I mentioned, a lot of optimism, renewed optimism. And in reality, the polls are showing that the race has, of course, shifted, but it's not by 10 or 15 or 20 points. I mean, do you still see this as a very tight race in a handful of, 6 and maybe 7 swing states?
Yeah, I think it is just very tight. The good thing for Harris is that there are more paths to 270. Essentially, Biden's only path that was left was winning Pennsylvania, winning Michigan, winning Wisconsin, and winning Nebraska's second congressional district. Remember that one electoral vote could actually end up being very, very important. So do not overlook Omaha.
Yeah, no kidding.
I would
Would
say
that have gotten him to 270 on the nose, or like
that would
just
have gotten
over?
him exactly to 270 on the
It's a
nose. So that
crazy
was,
scenario to consider, but yeah,
yeah.
we digress.
Right. But, so in the intervening weeks, we had moved Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia out of the toss up column to lean R. So that happened the weeks after the debate. We still kept the other, like the sort of blue wall states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin in there. We have, since at the Cook Political Report, shifted those 3 states back to toss up. And today, on Tuesday, we are also shifting a state, North Carolina, that had been in the lean Republican column into the toss-up column. And this is a state that the Biden campaign was talking about for a long time. We're going to put North Carolina in play. It hasn't gone Democrat since 2008. Barack Obama won it, but then he lost it in 2012. Trump won it twice. But you can just look at, like, one of the biggest things I think to see is, like, follow the money in these races. And you've seen the Trump campaign make really big buys in Georgia and in North Carolina, where they really thought those were over and they weren't going to have to spend as much time there. They're having to now. And you're seeing both candidates go there. Harris is going to hold a rally end of the week, next week in Savannah in Georgia. Harris was just in North Carolina. Trump was just there, in Arizona and Nevada too last week. So it comes down to sort of these 7 states, really.
Yeah. But it is wild, though. I mean, as you mentioned at the RNC, Republicans were talking about expanding the map with states like Minnesota. And now, in just a month's time, Democrats are hoping to expand the map in states like North Carolina. So it's just an unbelievable, unprecedented is an overused word, but shift that we've had in this race in just a matter of a month. Why has it shifted so much when it comes to the demographic groups? Is it people that are coming off the sidelines to support Kamala Harris, or is it people that are shifting from they were in the Trump camp because they didn't like something about Joe Biden, and now they've shifted to her?
It really is people that were undecided, or we're going to vote third party, or we're not going to vote at all. We had this term for them, sort of the double haters, that they didn't like either candidate. And so I always said one of Biden's biggest problems was just going to be apathy, that a lot of voters, we don't like either candidate. We're just not going to vote. And we've seen, like I said, it was predominantly younger voters and voters of color. And that is where we have seen such a huge surge across in all of those states. But, Latino voters there in Nevada, but I will say, so we've started doing our own swing state polling as well at the Cook Political Report. And we released our numbers a few weeks ago that sort of captured the very end of July and very beginning of August. So about a week and a half after the switch happened. And Harris was leading or tied in every battleground state except for Nevada. She was still behind 3 points in Nevada. So I still think Nevada is a tougher state just when we look at the demographics and when we look at where the economy is in the state. And, I like to remind people that Nevada sort of, I think people will, for the past few elections, they've been like, Nevada's blue. We don't have to worry about it. And, of these states here, it is the only, minus North Carolina, it's the only one that Democrats won in both 2016 and in 2020. But you all were the only state in the country to oust your incumbent governor in 2022. The closest Senate race, which Democrats did win, but very narrowly. And so I think, Trump has an appeal there, and, some of his proposals, like the no tax on tips, is something that's having, a really big, I think, is something that can really take hold there in a state there like Nevada that, is so focused on the service industry.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was wild looking at every single poll that kind of came in throughout the summer. Trump was leading. I look back on the 538 list, and it was every single poll essentially over Biden throughout the entire summer. And now it's within the margin of error. Trump's has led in a couple, Kamala
Yeah.
Harris has led in a couple. And so it's kind of back to that 50-50 range where the state is in play. And Trump coming here on Friday to talk about the no taxes on tips. He
Mhm.
obviously wants to win our 6 electoral votes, as does Kamala Harris. She was in Las Vegas prior to the convention. You guys still have us in the toss-up range. My guess is that we'll probably be in toss-up status until November 7th, right?
Probably November 5th. Yeah.
Okay. Nothing. I mean, what would it take really to have a drastic change in these ratings, or is it's just going to be tight here no matter what?
I wouldn't be surprised if all of these 7 states stay in toss up, just if these polls just continue to be very, very close. I mean, these races are going to be decided by just a couple of points. Third party candidates still on the ballot in many states, even though, RFK's removed his name and has endorsed Trump. It looks like he's still going to be on the ballot, at least in Michigan and North Carolina. Other third party candidates, Jill Stein in places, because if Jill Stein was not on the ballot in 2016, Hillary Clinton would have been president probably.
Yeah.
That margin in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania was small enough. So
Let's shift and talk about the Senate race specifically, because that's part of your focus. Senate races and
yeah,
governor's races. Here in Nevada, obviously, it is Army Captain Sam Brown, the Republican nominee, going up against Jacky Rosen, the Democratic incumbent. From your view, kind of from the outside, not here in the Silver State, what have you made from
yeah.
kind of following these campaigns so far?
We moved this race early on into the toss up column back in the spring. And a lot of it was just because of the presidential numbers we were seeing, and just because that race in 2022 had been so close. And, Nevada's such a unique state, and that it's so transient, and that Jacky Rosen was the only, vulnerable first term senator running. And she has to reintroduce herself. She's had a really rapid rise in politics, going from, a synagogue president to a one term House member to then being elected to the U.S. Senate. It's a very rapid rise. But what Rosen has been able to do is really set the narrative in this race. And Brown, he had a primary. He had to sort of work on that as well. And I think we've seen him, make some missteps, on particularly on Yucca Mountain and things, and had to walk that back. But he hasn't had the money to compete with Rosen. That's the main issue. Some of these other Senate races that I'm watching across the country, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, there are self-funding candidates that can just write themselves a check, but Brown isn't in that category. So I think after the June primary, he won it pretty convincingly,
Yeah.
but then really was largely dark on TV while Rosen has been up, and she's been particularly hammering him on the issue of abortion. And the first ad he went back up with was just a 15-second ad a couple of weeks ago from that interview, which, I mean, Brown, like many Republican candidates, have tried to get ahead of the issue after we saw how damaging it was to Republicans in Senate races after the Dobbs decision in June 2022. That interview with his wife, where they talked about the abortion that she had, and he reiterated, that I would not support a national abortion ban, and that I would, respect the current law in Nevada that's been enshrined there for 30 years. But the problem is that Brown, he's worked for very conservative organizations in the past. He's, in Texas, and when he was in Texas, supported different laws and things too. And so the Rosen campaign can point to that. And that's what they've been doing. So, we, in our polling that we had a few weeks ago here, now I will say we showed this as an 18-point race, and there is no way this is going to be an 18-point race. Like, yeah, those don't happen in Nevada. So I add that caveat that we know that. But just the shift that we have seen, and the way that Rosen is even outrunning the top of the ticket is just remarkable. And I think it shows that she's used her financial advantage well. And where we saw some of the biggest differences, shifts were with women, with undecided, with independents. Rosen has already aired, at this point, she'd already aired $16 million worth of ads, and Brown had only aired $1.4 million. So that just shows you,
Wow.
how lopsided that has been.
Yeah, she didn't have to spend any money in her primary, whereas Sam Brown did
Mhm.
face many primary challengers, including, Dr. Jeff Gunter, who had a lot of money and ran a bunch of ads as well. So a lot of his war chest,
Yeah.
or some of his war chest, was kind of depleted, even though he won that race handily.
Yeah. So since our polling in May, we've seen a 27-point shift among women towards Rosen.
Wow. Is
So
that
that
something?
mhm.
Can you overcome that? I mean, that seems like a huge number.
I think that's going to be hard. We moved it back into lane D for that first, even more so. I mean, I'm not as interested sometimes at the top line numbers at this juncture, but like that just tells me that Rosen's messaging on abortion is working. And then right as we were doing that, Brown came out with that ad, and it tells me, okay, it's really working, because if that's the message, he's playing defense going into this, and you want to
Yeah.
be playing offense.
It is unusual for a Republican to be out there trying and wanting to talk about abortion. Normally, it's an issue that they don't want to discuss, but it shows that he's attempting to make that not be an issue. Whereas I think, not a betting man, but Jacky Rosen will probably continue to run those abortion ads all the way up until November 5th.
I think so. And she's also, we've had seen a lot of Democratic super PACs going in there. We are seeing more Republicans outside groups going in, or we will start to after Labor Day. Club for Growth, the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Mitch McConnell's super PAC has spent some on the sort of issue side, but we haven't seen the main super PAC Senate Leadership Fund reserve there. That's something that would tell me that they feel like this is could be a flip for them. But we're seeing that money go into, Montana and Ohio, first of all, because those are still, as we look at the battleground, those are still better opportunities. And, I think even at this point, some of the open seat races, I think particularly Michigan might be, if you're looking for another pickup opportunity, Michigan could be a better pickup opportunity at this point than Nevada. And, I think really it comes down to money sometimes. And like, that's just where I think if Brown had been able to, I think, get out his story earlier and sort of set the narrative, this could have been a very different race. Because I think he's someone that has a very compelling story. And when you meet him in person, I think he's an engaging person. But when you're running sort of up against, I think Rosen has shown that the Reid machine and the way they are doing this is still very much alive and well, even though the Senate Majority Leader has passed on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Something I wanted to ask you about more broadly when you look at the battleground Senate races. I noticed on the Cook Political Report website that you guys say that Democratic Senate candidates are all far outpacing Kamala Harris, polling several points
Mhm.
ahead of her. I think when Biden was in the race, that kind of made sense because he was so unpopular. And
Yeah.
yet that trend has kind of continued now, even when Kamala Harris has been replaced as the nominee. Why are these Senate candidates doing so much better than she is?
I think they've been running these campaigns for a long time, and I think a lot of these candidates have their own identities and they have their own brand apart from her. And certainly, if you're, Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, if you're Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan, you welcome the top of the ticket doing better. Sort of a rising tide lifts all boats. But maybe it helps in Ohio a little bit too, but we'll see. But Ohio. Sherrod Brown and John Tester in Montana still face incredibly long odds. John Tester, especially, just because that's a 16-point Trump state, and that's one I'm, watching very closely. That's just the map overall still has not changed. It's just an incredibly difficult map for Democrats where they're on defense in virtually every state.
Yeah. What's really left in this race when it comes to the Senate races and the presidential race? Aside from this debate on September 10th that may or may not happen at this point, what is left that can really kind of change the dynamic in these last 2 months?
Well, I do think some voters, those undecided voters, and there is still a significant amount, and it could be decisive in just a race that's decided by a couple of points in all those states and in the Senate races. Again, Republicans have sort of held their money. Labor Day is kind of the traditional campaign kickoff and this sort of permanent campaign. Maybe that matters a little bit less, but I think sort of with the disgust with our politics, I think a lot of voters probably aren't going to be tuning in until maybe then. So maybe they're not going to be doing their research. And so I think Republicans are sort of gambling in a way that, okay, we spend our money now, it'll be bigger bang for our buck when people are actually paying attention instead of spending it in the summer or something. And that might work. So we'll see if once this spending sort of evens out a little bit more, if some of these races tighten. But, I think that I think Rosen had built a lead with that money. And then I think when everything changed at the top of the ticket from Biden to Harris, that's just sort of supercharged things in a way. But she is the one incumbent that still stands out to me that is just outrunning the top of the ticket, first Biden and then Harris by just an extraordinary amount, which again, is really surprising even for a first term senator. Some of Tammy Baldwin's seeking her third term. I mean, I think John Tester is out running by more just because he has to. But in these sort of, presidential and Senate battlegrounds, she's really posting remarkable numbers so far. And can that, Republicans are going to come in with hits against her. They're going to tie her to Harris. They're going to tie her to immigration and the economy. Can that bring our numbers down? But if you've built enough of a lead, that's a cushion.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of time still left until November 5th. Drink a lot of coffee between now and then, Jessica, because I'm sure you guys will be nonstop between now and then.
Thanks for having me, Ben. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jessica. We'll have you back another time sometime soon. A special thanks to Jessica for joining the show again. Before we go this week, as promised, the first in our Fact Check segment, where we dig deeper on the spots you see on the airwaves. If something is airing on our stations, both News 4 and Fox 11, we want to make sure viewers and listeners here have the full story. First up, a defining issue in American politics since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, abortion. We'll start with Republican Senate candidate Sam Brown, who's been running this 15-second commercial where he clarifies his current position.
There ought to be exceptions for medical emergencies, threat to the life of a mother, rape, incest. We're talking about someone's life and someone who's really in a tough spot, and that's why I'm not going to support a federal abortion ban.
I'm Sam Brown, and I approve this message.
The entire ad is a clip from Brown's exclusive NBC interview that aired in February, where he and his wife Amy revealed for the first time that she had an abortion back in 2008. As you heard there, he says he will not support a federal abortion ban. Brown's abortion positions have evolved over the years. Currently, he supports exceptions to abortion restrictions for the life and health of the mother and in cases of rape and incest, and he opposes a national ban, but that position has changed drastically from his time in Texas. Back in 2014, he said he supported a restrictive law there that banned abortions after 20 weeks without exceptions for rape or incest. And Brown's campaign website says this: I will oppose any bill that pushes for federal funding of abortion, late-term abortions, or abortion without parental notification, and I will support federal judges who understand the importance of protecting life, end quote. As you heard in our interview with Jessica Taylor, Rosen's ads have jumped on this. She's up with a 30-second ad of her own, accusing Brown of changing his position for political gain. It also resurfaces some of his comments on abortion that he's made in the past. Let's listen.
I'm Jacky Rosen, and I approve this message.
He's trying to change his story to get elected. But for years, MAGA extremist Sam Brown has been pushing to ban abortion. He pushed to overturn Roe v. Wade. He said abortion should be banned without any exceptions for rape or incest. Sam Brown even supported the extreme Texas ban.
On issues of life, it is a non-negotiable for me.
MAGA extremist Sam Brown will take away abortion rights in Nevada.
So yes, it is true that Brown back in 2014 supported a Texas law that banned abortions at 20 weeks with no exceptions for rape or incest. And the quote you heard there where he said, on issues of life, that's non-negotiable for me. That comment was during a legislative candidate forum in 2014, according to the Nevada Independent. And the final line there saying Sam Brown will take away abortion rights in Nevada, that leaves out some important context. Brown has repeatedly said on the campaign trail this year that he opposes a federal abortion ban and supports exceptions for rape and incest and the life and health of the mother. So that is his current stance. As we've said, though, that's evolved quite a bit from his position back when he was running for a Texas House seat in 2014. All right, we hope that gives listeners and voters some additional context and clarity on this issue, and more to come in our weekly Fact Check segment. We plan to run it on News 4 and Fox 11, as well as bring you those segments here on this podcast. That's all for this week. If you learned something, if the show helped make you a more informed voter, if you enjoyed it, please do leave a rating and a review so more people can discover Battleground Nevada. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back in your feed with a new episode next week.